Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to mypillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. mypillow.com. Promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Breaking news out of Washington. The Trump administration says Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino will leave Minnesota and Border Czar Tom Homan will take over and report directly to President Trump. We have the latest as the chaos in Minnesota continues. A self-described Antifa agitator in Minneapolis issued a chilling call for an armed mob to take to the streets and, quote, do what needs to be done to push federal immigration authorities out of the Twin Cities. And Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, wonder how things got out of control. That's a recipe for further chaos. Armed Antifa on the streets confronting ICE. Wow. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans say they will move ahead with a massive funding package in their attempt to keep the government open and hope to push past Democrat opposition in the process. The Democrats are trying to defund DHS. And South Carolina Republicans are on track to keep our spot as first in the South on the 2028 presidential primary calendar. This is a huge win for the SCGOP. I'll tell you all about it later in today's show.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
Well, here's the breaking news out of Washington yesterday. Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, the face of the Trump administration's campaign to arrest and deport criminal illegal immigrants, will be leaving Minnesota, along with some border agents amid violent, sometimes deadly clashes between federal authorities and anti-ICE agitators. Bovino and an unspecified number of U.S. Border Patrol agents will be leaving the state as soon as today, multiple federal sources are saying. The news came the same day that President Trump announced that he would be deploying Border Czar Tom Homan to take point in Minnesota. Reporting directly to him, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended Bovino, calling him a wonderful man and he's a great professional, she said, as she reminded the media that the president is carrying out the mission he was given when being elected in 2024.
Saturday's shooting remains under active investigation by Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI. The Customs and Border Protection is also conducting their own internal review. As President Trump said yesterday, the administration is reviewing everything with respect to the shooting, and we will let that investigation play out. But let's be clear about the circumstances which led to that moment on Saturday. This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota. For weeks, Governor Walz and the Mayor Jacob Fry and other elected Democrats were spreading lies about federal law enforcement officers who are risking their lives daily to remove the worst criminal illegal aliens from our streets: murderers, rapists, pedophiles, human traffickers, and gang members. Governor Walz and Mayor Fry have shamefully blocked local and state police from cooperating with ICE, actively inhibiting efforts to arrest violent criminals. They have also used their platforms to encourage left-wing agitators to stalk, record, confront, and obstruct federal officers who are just trying to lawfully perform their duties, which has created dangerous situations threatening both these officers and the general public and Minnesotans alike. This is precisely what unfolded in Minneapolis on Saturday morning. Obstructing federal law enforcement and inciting violence against officers is wrong and illegal. This used to be a universally accepted position in the United States. Amid the hysteria, we must remember how we got here to this moment today and what this Democrat opposition is about. Former President Joe Biden and the Democrats opened America's borders for 4 years, inviting tens of millions of illegal aliens from all over the world to flood into our country. Among them, violent criminals who terrorized American communities and have inflicted devastating, permanent pain and harm on law-abiding Americans and their families. Yet we never saw outrage from Democrats or their allies in the liberal media over these horrifying crimes against U.S. citizens. The pain of American angel families was ignored and dismissed because it undermined the Democrat narrative.
Ms. Leavitt went on to express a White House support of Greg Bovino as he continues to lead CBP, saying he is going to very much continue to lead Customs and Border Patrol throughout and across the country. Mr. Homan will be the main point of contact on the ground in Minneapolis to follow up. Before leading operations throughout the country, Bovino was chief of the Border Patrol's El Centro sector in Southern California, which is responsible for about 70 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, covers Imperial and Riverside counties. Bovino has been criticized by opponents, of course, because of Trump's deportation campaign. He's been criticized over the tactics used by federal immigration authorities to apprehend the criminal illegal aliens. News of Bovino's departure came after a deadly weekend this past weekend, which 37-year-old nurse Alex Preddy was shot by a Border Patrol agent. Preddy was armed with a handgun, was filming federal officers on a Minneapolis street. As we've said many, many times, there is a 100% sure way not to be killed by a federal law enforcement officer, and that is to stay at home. If you're going to be out protesting, if you don't confront them, if you don't engage them, that's also a 100% way of staying alive. Now, authorities, of course, say that Preddy was resisting disarmament when he was shot. He was carrying a handgun that he's legally licensed to have. At the time, authorities were targeting Jose Huerto Shuma, an illegal immigrant with a criminal history including domestic assault for intentional conflict with bodily harm, disorderly conduct, and driving without a valid driver's license. The White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, reminded the media of why this operation is important.
Innocent Americans like Jocelyn Nungray, Laken Riley, and Rachel Morin are just a few of the many victims savagely murdered by illegal alien criminals. Earlier this month, an illegal alien from Mexico with a long criminal history who came into our country under Joe Biden's administration threw a baseball-sized stone at a school bus carrying children in New Jersey and fractured the skull of an 8-year-old innocent child. President Trump promised accountability to these American families by securing the border, deporting every illegal alien who has committed crimes, especially and most importantly, violent crimes. Nearly 80 million Americans voted for him to deliver on that very promise, and he is. As the duly elected president, the president is fulfilling the will of the people by arresting and removing these threats from our country in cities from Los Angeles to New York and, yes, Minneapolis. Yet Democrat leaders in Minnesota with sanctuary city policies have actively defied federal immigration law and the will of the people. And as a result of that defiance, 2 Minnesotans have now tragically lost their lives on the streets of Tim Walz's state.
And she's right about all of that. The media have forgotten about some of the innocents who have lost their lives to the illegals who are in our country. They just completely gloss over that. I'll say it again. I'll repeat myself. I'm sorry that Alex Preddy lost his life. I'm sorry that Renee Good lost her life. But again, there's a 100% guarantee you will not lose your life due to being shot and killed by a federal agent if you do not confront them, if you abide by their orders. It's just that simple. President Trump said that Mr. Homan will be reporting directly to him and will help lead the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement operations in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I don't know what Tim Walz and Jacob Fry and other Democrat leaders in Minneapolis want. I guess they just want law enforcement to leave completely. We've continued to get reports that local law enforcement will not support ICE. They were not there to help push away the crowd on Saturday when this happened to this young man. Had they been, it probably would have had a different outcome, because in addition to trying to catch the criminals, ICE is having to deal with these idiots out on the street, in this case, an armed idiot. In a True Social post yesterday making the announcement, the president said, "I'm sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough but fair and will report directly to me. Separately, a major investigation is going on with respect to the massive $20 billion plus welfare fraud that has taken place in Minnesota and is at least partially responsible for the violent organized protests going on in the street." President Donald Trump yesterday on True Social. It's not your fault that losing weight is getting harder and harder. You're eating better, you're moving more, but your body isn't responding the way it used to. That's not willpower, that's metabolism. And believe me, I've learned so much about the metabolism from the folks at PhD Weight Loss, and it's made a huge difference in my life. Joey Hudson here. For many people, years of dieting quietly slows the metabolic system down, so the harder you try, the less progress you see. At PhD Weight Loss, they help people identify what's actually blocking fat loss, and they fix the root cause, not just count calories. If you want to understand why your body isn't cooperating, call PhD Weight Loss now and mention Fix My Weight Loss to unlock the New Year's special. It's free, it's personalized, and it could explain everything. Call 864-644-1900 and say Fix My Weight Loss. That's 864-644-1900 and say Fix My Weight Loss to get started today. You can also find them online at myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com. Start the new year off right and fix your weight loss. A lot of people continue to second guess what happened in Minneapolis on Saturday. It's unfolding just like we saw all the second guessing when Renee Good lost her life. Over the weekend, a self-described Antifa activist in Minneapolis openly called for armed confrontation with federal immigration officers. Not protest, not marches, armed confrontation. And almost nobody in the national media seems particularly bothered by this challenge. The man's name is Kyle Wagner. You ever heard of him? He lives in Minneapolis. He's not hiding. He's not doing this secretly. He posts videos of himself online. He calls himself a master hate baiter. He hands out gas masks at protests. He wears tactical gear. He tattoos Antifa symbols all over his body. And after the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy, an ICU nurse that was killed during this chaotic encounter, Mr. Wagner went online, told people it was time for, and I'm reading directly from his quote, "good men in the streets, armed and ready." Those were his words. That's not rhetoric. It's not some slogan. It is a call for violence. Here, listen to him for yourself.
I'm Kyle. I'm Antifa, and everybody in my DMs and calling me and blowing me up, I love all of you. I understand that the women who see this are really scared that their husbands are going to go and not come back, and that's real, and I am very sorry, ladies, that is what is happening. But I don't understand how you're struggling to follow that they're going to keep killing us if we don't end this. And we can't end this without good men in the streets, armed and ready to protect innocent people from being gunned down by these masked murderers, these fascist occupiers. I need boots on the ground, and I need them prepared to do what needs to be done so that this does not cost more innocent lives. We do not have any more time to let this drag out. I know it sucks, but this is the Iron Front. It's an individual choice. There are no generals in this fight. Stand on your own two. Viva la resistance. I'm going back to the streets.
Now, according to the mainstream media, here's the part you're supposed to ignore. Wagner admits he cannot legally own a firearm, but he wants you or someone else to bring one. That should tell you everything you need to know. This all comes as emotions are already running hot in Minneapolis after the two deadly incidents involving ICE agents. Alex Preddy this past weekend, Renee Good a few weeks back when she was killed after ICE says she tried to use her vehicle as a weapon against officers. Both cases, of course, are under investigation. That's exactly the point. Investigations require facts, not the word of the mob. But instead of waiting, instead of letting the process work, we're now seeing people online pushing the idea that the streets should decide. The mob should take control. The people should make the decision. Wagner told followers he needed boots on the ground and that people had to be prepared to do what has to be done. That phrase, do what needs to be done, has a history. It's what people say when they want violence without accountability. And this didn't stay online. Over the weekend, a mob descended on a downtown hotel where they believed ICE agents were staying. A federal officer was reportedly injured. The hotel lobby was trashed. Private property, a hotel, was trashed because the mob thought ICE was staying there. Wagner later described it as some fun downtown with the Icy boys. He thinks it's funny. He thinks it's okay to trash a hotel. Now, you tell me, ICE agents are being charged or accused of intimidation. Is this not intimidation? Now, here's the uncomfortable question the mainstream media is not asking. What happens when armed activists do show up as a result of this guy's call? Because this guy seems to be asking to be shot. Is that not recklessness? It puts everyone else at risk, too. Bystanders, police, protesters who didn't sign up for a firefight if he's calling for an armed insurrection. Law enforcement officers don't get to opt out of danger. They respond when they're called. They enforce the law. And yes, when force is used, it must be scrutinized. But you don't get accountability by escalating chaos. And let's be clear here. Calling for armed resistance against federal officers, that's not civil disobedience. It's not free speech theater. It's flirting with violence. It's flirting. It's a form of domestic terrorism, I would say. And if this were happening on the right, if someone wearing a MAGA hat called for armed mobs to confront federal agents, you know exactly how this would be covered, don't you? There'd be no ambiguity. There'd be no nuance. There would be no context. Now, Instagram eventually removed Wagner's account, which had more than 100,000 followers. But by then, the message was already out. And once you normalize this kind of rhetoric, it doesn't stay theory for very long, does it? Because there's some idiots out there just waiting on direction. Here's the reality. As we've said many times over these past few months, you can oppose ICE policy. You can criticize federal enforcement. You can criticize the president. You can protest peacefully. It's what it's all about. But once you start calling for armed confrontation, you're no longer seeking justice. You're gambling with lives, your own and the lives of other innocent people who think they're just out there in a political protest. If we care about the truth in these shootings, wait for the facts. Wait for the investigation. If we care about innocent lives, we lower the temperature. We don't escalate it. And what Mr. Wagner needs to understand, if he cares about holding our country together, stop pretending that street justice is somehow moral when his side does it. Because history shows us how this ends. And it's not going to have a very good ending. One more thing on the situation in Minnesota. Yesterday, we're told President Trump was on the phone with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. The message, enough is enough. It's time for the state to stop playing politics and start cooperating with federal law enforcement before more innocent lives are lost. Now, this all comes, of course, on the heel of this high-profile fatal incident over the weekend. The White House ends up mincing words. I shared with you earlier, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made it clear Trump blames these deaths squarely on Democrat leadership in Minnesota, period. Specifically Walz, specifically Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, accusing them of enabling these dangerous agitators by creating a sanctuary environment where law enforcement hand is tied, where it appears to these people they're being encouraged by a governor who is coaching them to be sure and have their phone out and tape everything, every confrontation with federal agents. So what does the president want? According to Ms. Leavitt, 3 simple things. Number 1, turn over all incarcerated illegal immigrants, especially those with active warrants or criminal histories. If Fry will do this in the city of Minneapolis, the problem will be solved, at least partially, because he won't have ICE agents having to go door to door in neighborhoods looking for people. Number 2, allow local police to cooperate with ICE. That means handing over suspects, sharing intel, and being out there like a true partnership and helping protect these ICE agents when they're being confronted by these local protesters. 3, support ICE and CBP efforts. No more interference from local leaders. No more encouraging and coaching people to resist. No more being critical of the ICE enforcement. Now, here's the kicker. President Trump says if the state agrees to these terms, then there won't be a need for a larger federal presence, meaning Customs and Border Protection can stand down. There's already a partial stand down, I think, by simply pulling Greg Bovino out. I think that sends a signal to Walz, and maybe this was part of the conversation, but I think it sends a clear signal to Governor Walz and Jacob Fry that the president is willing to negotiate. I mean, that's an olive branch. But if the state refuses to start cooperating, well, the implication is pretty clear. Federal law enforcement will do the job with or without Minnesota's help. I just hope they understand that. Now, Governor Walz admits the call happened. He called it, quote, productive. But let's be real. His tone didn't exactly scream cooperation. In fact, Governor Walz is doubling down in an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, claiming that what's happening in Minnesota isn't about immigration anymore. He calls it a campaign of organized brutality by the federal government. That's the kind of rhetoric that keeps this mess going on. That encourages the chaos. That lets these dummies out there who are protesting, risking their lives, risking the lives of federal agents, it encourages them to keep going. That, hey, if the governor recognizes what we're doing, he thinks it's important, then we need to stay out here. We need to keep confronting these agents. We need to keep blowing our whistles, which, by the way, is the silliest thing I have ever heard. A bunch of adults running up and down the street, blowing a whistle at a federal officer. I mean, you just got to laugh at them when you see it. What do they think blowing the whistle does? I know it's supposed to be an alert system, but how stupid. And let's not forget, President Trump is pushing Congress to finally outlaw sanctuary cities. Do away with them once and for all. A move that is long overdue. I hope the Congress, the Republican majority, the Republican-led Congress has the courage to do so. If cities and states won't cooperate with federal law enforcement, they're not just undermining immigration policy, they're putting lives of their citizens at risk, as we've already seen. So bottom line is, the president's message is loud and clear. It's time to let the cops be cops. No more politics, no more chaos. It's time for Minnesota to choose law and order or lawlessness. So far, they've been on the side of lawlessness. Meanwhile, you've got Democrats in the U.S. Congress trying to defund the HSS. Senate Republicans are moving ahead with a huge funding package in their attempt to keep the government open and to push through the Democrat opposition in the process. Senate Appropriations Chair Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, or so she says, yesterday teed up the first procedural step for the 6-bill funding package. It includes the politically divisive Department of Homeland Security. It's part of their funding. This is where the Democrats are trying to defund DHS. Despite warnings from Senate Democrats that they will do whatever they can to block the legislation, the Republicans say they're going to proceed. And unfortunately, they've had a few Democrats that typically have voted for them, like John Fetterman, who has indicated he will not be voting with the Republicans for this funding bill. So Monday's action is just the first of several hurdles lawmakers will have to overcome, but important nonetheless. given the extreme weather that rocked most of the country over the weekend, headed into yesterday, still around. We're going to give you an update on that a little bit later. And has threatened to delay this process altogether because lawmakers have had trouble getting to Washington. Airports closed, a lot of flights, thousands of flights canceled. Now, Senate Majority Leader John Thune sort of is gambling on this. It comes as a Friday deadline to fund the government is coming quickly. And we still don't know when lawmakers will be able to make it back to Washington. Hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. Passing this package and sending it to President Trump's desk would fully fund the government until September, when lawmakers will again need to have to pass a dozen spending bills to keep the lights on. But the immediate fight, and one that threatens to derail the GOP's plan to avert yet another shutdown, is over DHS funding because of the tense situation in Minneapolis. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the Democrat caucus have come out en masse against this broader package, including the Homeland Funding Bill, following the fatal shooting, of course, of Alex Preddy. Things were already tough anyway. It was going to be hard to get the votes because of Renee Good's shooting. But now with this most recent one right in the middle of the process, it's going to make it even tougher for Republicans to push this through. You have to understand, Schumer and Senate Democrats have just rapidly mobilized their opposition to funding the bill. Despite shoring up a largely unified front, we're told, including several moderate Senate Democrats who have crossed the aisle consistently to help Republicans reopen the government last year, Schumer does have one perennial defector, and that's Senator John Fetterman that I mentioned a minute ago. He has consistently opposed any attempt to shut down the government. He joined Senate Republicans over a dozen times last year to reopen the government as his colleagues resisted. But again, we don't know if we can count on John Fetterman this time. He's made some pretty odd statements. He noted in a statement that even shutting down the government would affect immigration and customs enforcement funding, given that the GOP's colossal One Big Beautiful Bill injected over $170 billion over the next several years into DHS. Fetterman said in a statement, "I reject the calls to defund or abolish ICE. I strongly disagree with many strategies and practices ICE have deployed in Minneapolis and believe that must change. I want a conversation on the DHS appropriations bill and support stripping it from the minibus." He went on to say, "It's unlikely that will happen and our country will suffer another shutdown. We must find a way forward, and I remain committed to being a voice of reason and common sense." Now, what Fetterman and his colleagues want is for the DHS bill to be taken out of this bigger package so they can vote on it individually. But doing that would open up a procedural nightmare in this whole process and would likely lead to a partial government shutdown again, according to Senate insiders. And like the last attempt or the shutdown, Senator Schumer argued that the onus was on Thune and Senate Republicans and the White House, despite Senate Democrats having negotiated the current funding package for a bipartisan basis. Once again, just like he did before, Schumer said in a statement, and I'm reading, "The responsibility to prevent a partial government shutdown is on Leader Thune and Senate Republicans. If Leader Thune puts those 5 bills on the floor this week, we can pass them right away. If not, Republicans will again be responsible for another government shutdown." This would be a very, very bad time for us to have another partial shutdown. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Let me give you some good political news, okay? We've had all this drama, chaos, and bad news. Let's just be honest about it. But there is something good for the Palmetto State, my home state of South Carolina. And this one matters a lot more than people outside of the state sometimes realize. South Carolina Republicans, we're told, are on track to keep our spot as first in the South on the 2028 presidential primary calendar. That is a big deal. It's not just a scheduling detail. It shows the influence, the power, the relevance that the Palmetto State has in choosing the next Republican nominee. Last week, the Republican National Committee took an important step to make sure that stays the case, that continues after decades of being there. I mean, for more than 4 decades now, since 1980, South Carolina has been the first southern state to weigh in during the presidential primary process, and over that time, we built a reputation. And by the way, let me remind you that all came about during the Reagan administration, and when my friend Lee Atwater was the Republican National Committee chairman, and he was able to put South Carolina at the front of the list. It's been very important since. South Carolina has been the first southern state to weigh in since that time now. We don't just show up in South Carolina. We don't just vote. We help decide nominees. And by the way, you got to, and I'm primarily talking about Republican, but you got to remember, sadly, and I'm ashamed to say it, but South Carolina is the reason Joe Biden was elected. If you'll recall, James Clyburn, Joe Biden was getting nowhere. James Clyburn brought him to South Carolina, delivered the Palmetto State for Joe Biden. He became president. Shame on James Clyburn. I mean, history backs this up. Since South Carolina first became first in the South, the candidate who wins here almost always goes on to the Republican nomination. There's only been one exception. That was Newt Gingrich in 2012. Other than that, if you win South Carolina, you're probably headed to the convention as a nominee. And that's why this spot is so coveted. That's why other states keep trying to take it. So last week, a key RNC committee met in Santa Barbara, California. I wonder why the Republican National Committee is meeting in California. I'll have to ask Drew McKissick that next time I talk with him. South Carolina GOP committeeman Tyson Grinstead was there, and he got the vote on our behalf. And the committee voted to move forward with the same early state calendar Republicans have used in the past. That keeps South Carolina right where we are, first in the South, right behind Iowa and New Hampshire. Grinstead called it a major victory for the state, and he's right, because let's be honest, states don't just get this position by accident. Again, we've earned it. Now, this wasn't a sure thing. For a while, Florida had been eyeing that position. And it seems like every 4 years we go through this conversation of should South Carolina be first in the South. You can understand why Florida wants it. Florida is a big Republican state. It's influential. It plays a major role in the national elections. Typically, it follows South Carolina. But South Carolina has something Florida doesn't. Retail politics, town halls, candidates eating barbecue, standing in church foyers, answering tough questions from real voters. This is a proving ground for candidates. And when Florida flirted with trying to jump in line in front of us, it was actually Florida GOP chair Evan Power who made the motion to keep South Carolina in that first southern spot. That kind of tells you something. It wasn't about ego. This was about party unity and strategy, especially with President Trump's agenda moving forward. Behind the scenes, the decision reflects something South Carolina Republicans have been doing for decades, and that is building relationships. Drew McKissick, you hear him on this show quite often. He's the state GOP chairman. He put it plainly. South Carolina's RNC members have spent years cultivating trust with other states, and those relationships looks like it's paid off again. That's how you keep your seat at the table. And the confidence level is pretty high that this is going to stick. There are two more steps: a Rules Committee vote and then a full RNC vote requiring 75% approval. Those are expected later this summer. But here's the key point. Iowa and New Hampshire were on the committee when the vote happened. And that makes it very unlikely anyone is going to throw a wrench in the process later. Now, while Republicans are locking this down, Democrats are doing what Democrats often do, fighting among themselves. Democrats in South Carolina are still battling to keep their first in the South status, with states like Michigan, Nevada, Iowa, New Hampshire all trying to take it away. Even Jamie Harrison, the former DNC chair, now a DNC member, has admitted publicly that South Carolina has earned the position, and he's right, whether Democrats like it or not, as far as the Republican Party being first in the South. Now, again, why does all this matter? Being early in the process gives the Palmetto State influence over who becomes president. Candidates won't ignore us. They'll fly all around the state. They'll get here early and often. They can't write us off. They can't ignore us. We're a small state, but we pack a big punch. They have to listen to us. And that matters for conservative values. It matters for military families, for faith communities, for all voters, for working families across the state. We don't just reflect the South. We reflect the Republican base, the base that elects our party nominee over and over again. And remember, we have been right every time except 2012 with Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich won South Carolina. He seemed to be on a roll, went to Florida. In fact, Mike Gallagher and I went with him. We were broadcasting in South Carolina the night of the primary. Newt won. He invited us to jump on this newly chartered 737. We flew to Florida, flew all around Florida the next week with him. He didn't quite make it. He fizzled out. Didn't go anywhere. Again, this is all good for South Carolina. I love South Carolina politics. This is where real political victories seem to happen, and this goes far beyond just the politics of it. When our U.S. senators, when our House members need something passed that's going to benefit our state, this type of treatment, knowing the reputation we have in South Carolina, particularly among those in the U.S. Senate, those in the U.S. House who have their eye on someday running for president. They don't want to try to do anything to upset South Carolina. They want to stay in our good graces. And if history is any guide, when South Carolina speaks early in 2028, and it's hard to believe we're already talking about 2028, isn't it? I mean, we're just 1 year into the Trump administration. He has 3 more full years, but of course we're jockeying for position already. A lot of people are, because Trump can't run again. So we know there's going to be somebody different as the nominee next time around. Once again, we help pick presidents in South Carolina. That's important to continue, that we keep that strategy, that we keep that tradition. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.